Chairman of the House Appropriations Committee, and I join with Chairman Shelby in welcoming some of you back to your second conference of the day, and for some of you, your first conference of the day. But we're glad we're all here together to do the work of the nation. We're making great strides toward returning to regular order and funding the federal government on time and within budget. This would not be possible without the cooperation of my partnership with Chairman Shelby, Ranking Member Leahy, and Ranking Member Lowy. I want to thank them for their dedication to this process and for getting our work done. That scratchy noise you hear is Mr. Price, who's going to be doing some long-distance statements, but he doesn't know he'll be at the end of the line. Excuse me. Congress is making progress on our appropriations bill that hasn't been seen in well over a decade. In fact, the House and Senate haven't held a conference meeting on the Interior Bill since fiscal year 2009. This is in part due to the hard work of the Conference Committee and our professional staff that we're here today. They have negotiated and labored over the past month to bring this conference report before the committee. This third package includes 4 appropriations bills: Interior, Financial Services, Agriculture and Rural Development, Transportation, Housing, and Urban Development. This will fund necessary programs that bolster economic growth, create jobs, ease congestion in our roads, rails, ports, and skies, and improve essential infrastructure in communities across the nation. It will also preserve and promote our natural resources, ensure our parks and public lands remain accessible, support American farmers and ranchers.
We stay up all night long reading. fiscal year. I hope I won't talk anymore because I want to get us moving toward that. I think, though, it will demonstrate to the American people that we can actually do our work, and in both parties and across the Capitol.
Thank you, Senator Leahy. My pleasure to recognize the ranking member of the full committee, Ms. Lowy from great state of New York, for any remarks or statements she may have. Ms. Lowy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I am truly disappointed that even as we have made so much progress on defense and labor HHS education, we have been unable to do the same with this set of 4 bills. House Democrats have insisted that we fund the important priorities in the agricultural, financial services, and general government, interior, environment, and transportation HUD bills without divisive partisan riders. If we are to have any hope of avoiding a continuing resolution on these bills, House Republicans must drop their insistence on poison pill riders that threaten our air and water and weaken protections for American consumers. Until that happens, we will be forced to keep the important domestic priorities in these bills in a holding pattern. That will deprive American families, businesses, and communities of the certainty they deserve. Finally, I must once again raise my strong objection to the majority's refusal to fund election security grants. The Trump administration's top national security officials have repeatedly warned about threats to our elections. In fact, the esteemed former senator from Indiana and director of national intelligence Dan Coats recently said, and I quote, "The digital infrastructure that serves this country is literally under attack." Yet, instead of shoring up our state election systems and reassure the American people about the integrity of their ballots, this Congress would rather stick its head in the sand and do nothing. This is truly shameful. We can do so much better, and Democrats are ready to stand with Republicans and fund these agencies on time, but we have to leave the policy riders for the authorizing committees to do their jobs.
Thank you, Ms. Lowy. Pleasure to recognize the House Interior Subcommittee Chair, Mr. Calvert, California.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm honored to join you all today as a member of the Conference Committee. Pleased that the fiscal year 2019 Interior Environment Related Agency Appropriation Bill is part of this appropriations package. Mr. Simpson pointed out to me that between what trees we've burned in the West, we've used the rest of the trees for the bills before us. So it's a lot of paper here, a lot of work. Represents a lot of work. I want to thank Chairman Frelinghuysen for his continued determination, dedication in getting us to this point of the process. Formal conference committee is something that many of us haven't seen in many years. It's my third in a week, so I feel really pleased about this. It's a real testament to the committee's chairman and ranking members that we're returning to regular order. Along with my ranking member, Ms. McCollum, I appreciate the opportunity to work with my Senate colleagues, Chairman Murkowski and Ranking Member Udall, as well as the members of the conference committee. We're negotiating in good faith, working toward a resolution to all of the differences that the agencies and departments included in the Interior Environment Bill has, and we make sure that they're adequately funded. The House and Senate have different priorities in our respective interior bills, but I'm confident that we will continue to work over the coming days to make sure this bill reflects the priorities of both chambers and the greater interests of the nation. Finally, I want to thank our staff on both sides for their hard work, and I want to thank my colleagues for their collegiality throughout this process, and look forward to seeing this package cross the finish line. So with that, I yield back to
Thank you, Mr. Calvert. Pleased to recognize the Senate Interior Subcommittee, Mrs. Murkowski, for any remarks she may wish to make.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I'm pleased to sit behind such a stack of paperwork, trees, or truly representative of the good work that has gone into these bills, the significance of where we are in a process, I think cannot be overstated enough. 9 years it's been since we have had full committee process, full hearings, going through the floor, and then here to an actual conference committee. It truly is my hope that this package will as well become part of that package of bills that the President will sign into law before the end of this fiscal year. There has been good work that has come about through the tone and the cooperative arrangement that the chairman and the vice chairman on the Senate side, as well as our colleagues in the House, have demonstrated to advance these appropriations bills through regular order. And so making sure that we are able to continue that in good faith, good process is something that I think we all want to see. I'm very pleased as chairman of the Senate Interior Appropriations Committee to acknowledge the work that we have done with several of the priorities that so many of you have expressed to us, whether it is the important funding for our public lands, our environment, our Indian health services. We have fully funded significant priorities such as payment in lieu of taxes. We address priorities like LWCF, wildfire suppression, provided for critical needs in so many different areas. I want to acknowledge the good work of my ranking member, Vice Chairman Senator Udall, and working with our colleagues on the other side. It has been a good process. It has been one I have appreciated taking part in. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Murkowski. Pleased to recognize Ms. McCollum, House Interior Subcommittee Ranking Member, for any remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, I'd like to thank my fellow Senate colleagues, Murkowski and Udall, for the collegiality in which we address some of the challenges ahead of us. And I share with my chairman, Mr. Calvert, a big thanks and to our staff for getting us to the point where we are today on both sides of the aisle. And I'm pleased that we're attempting to pass a series of minibuses before the end of the fiscal year in an attempt to restore some semblance of balance of regular orders. And Mr. Chairman, Mr. Frelinghauser, it really goes to your hard work in making sure that we did that. I appreciate the courtesy and the respect you have shown the people of my district in respecting my election certificate during this process, and I wish you all the best in the years ahead. But I'm disappointed, as my ranking member has pointed out, that despite the Interior bill passing the House in July, we are conferencing down to the wire with only 4 legislative days remaining in the House before the end of the fiscal year. The programs in the Interior bill, they impact all of us, from preserving our natural and cultural heritage to protecting our health and safety by ensuring that we have clean air to breathe and clean water to drink. The Interior bill also upholds the federal government's trust responsibilities to our Native brothers and sisters, and I want to express how sincerely proud I am of the nonpartisan approach, and I mean nonpartisan approach, we take in upholding these commitments. In the context of the work of working together in a bipartisan way, I would like to applaud the Senate for their approach in prohibiting the inclusion of new policy riders in the appropriation bills. I highlight that approach because more than 20 riders were added to the House bill, and they continue to plague these conference negotiations. With Republicans having majorities in the House and the Senate, and President Trump in the White House pushing these broad, inappropriate riders on appropriation bills is unnecessary. The Appropriation Authorizing Committee should address these topics through a full and transparent public hearing process. The investments we make in this bill are just too important to let them get bogged down by partisan policy fights. We are in a defining moment of history. The Interior bill has the potential to make a global difference in the quality of life for generations to come. So let us move forward on a path to complete fiscal year 2019 appropriation bills in a bipartisan way so that we can achieve a successful outcome for our nation and for those we serve. With that, I yield back.
Thank you, Ms. McCollum. Pleased to recognize the Senate Interior Subcommittee Ranking Member, Mr. Udall, for any remarks he may wish to make.
Thank you, Chairman Frelinghausen, for the recognition. And as I begin, I just want to note what a remarkable achievement it is to convene a conference on the Interior Appropriations Bill for the first time in nearly a decade. Much of the credit is due to the leadership of Chairman Shelby and Vice Chairman Leahy, who were determined to work on a bipartisan basis to restore regular order and reject poison pill riders. I salute them. They've given us a successful formula to get these bills signed into law. I'd like to thank my chairman, Senator Murkowski, who has been a tremendous partner through this entire process. Even though we don't always agree, I'm proud we were able to work through and to find common ground. Finally, I want to thank my House colleagues, Chairman Ken Calvert and Ranking Member Betty McCollum, for working closely with us to produce the framework for a very good bill. The package before us takes care of the programs our constituents back home care about, including national parks, public lands, water infrastructure, and environmental protection. This bill includes important increases for the Indian Health Service and the arts and cultural programs, including the National Endowment for the Arts and Humanities. And I'm proud that it maintains funding for the Land and Water Conservation Fund, an important message as we work to pass a long-term reauthorization for the program. We are so close to reaching final agreement, but what stands in our way is a number of remaining items, poison pill riders, that are still unresolved. I know that there are real differences of opinion. One member's poison pill is another member's antidote. But these provisions don't belong in appropriations bills, and they are standing in the way of us enacting these bills by October the 1st. We need to pass a clean interior bill and put these funds to work in communities back home. I know we can get there, so let's get the work done. Yield back.
Thank you, Senator Udall. Pleased to recognize the House Financial Services Subcommittee Chair, Mr. Graves of Georgia.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To begin, I want to acknowledge the improvement that this process here in the conference committee truly means for the government funding process, and it's a testament to the men and women in this room, in particular the new chairman of the Senate Appropriations Committee, Chairman Shelby, in your first 6 months. Congratulations, great success. And to my counterpart, Senator Lankford, who's a dear friend and former House colleague, and appreciate your good work and our work together as we wrap this up. As many of you know, the financial services portion of this bill contains a very new feature that I'd like to highlight to everyone today. And that's called the Fund for America's Kids and Grandkids, which safeguards tax dollars for future generations. Now, this is the #1 priority of the House Majority Leader in the House. It is a priority of the President and the administration, where we have saved $585 million to make an initial deposit. This money in this account is protected. It's protected from being spent or transferred, and it's only accessible when we, as two bodies, come together and balance our budget. This approach causes us to truly think about what all of this deficit spending means and in whose name we're borrowing money in, and who ultimately is going to get stuck with this debt. Establishing the Fund for America's Kids and Grandkids means that we are appropriating with a new spirit. That is, just because you can spend it doesn't mean we have to spend it. CBO just announced this week that we're on track to reach a $1 trillion deficit just this year. So I urge every member sitting in this room to consider our kids and our grandkids and the opportunity that we have before us, just to take a small, incremental step, good faith, good step here, towards saving them from this devastating debt crisis that looms. Mr. Chairman, before I close, I also want to mention that there are more than 20 bipartisan pieces of legislation that have been included in the financial services bill that are reforms that have bipartisan support in the House, over 270 votes for each of them, and in fact 11 of them have bipartisan support and co-sponsors in the Senate. Each of these cut regulations and streamline agency processes. And importantly, this bill brings transparency and congressional oversight to the Bureau of Consumer Financial Protection by bringing it under our annual appropriations process. So in conclusion, our bill certainly represents the House majority view, and I look forward to a genuine exchange that ensures that this viewpoint is represented in the final product. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Graves. I'm pleased to recognize the Senate Financial Services Subcommittee Chair, Mr. Lankford, for any time.
Chairman Frelinghuysen, thank you, and for the other members that are here, thanks for the hard work and for the engagement on these issues. I do want to begin, though, by expressing my appreciation for the ranking member on the subcommittee that I have the privilege to work with, Chris Coons. He has, throughout this process, been defiant, difficult, and disagreeable. But he's also been a great partner, has been honest through the whole process as we've worked through the issues, and is a friend, and I'm grateful for that. Also want to be able to thank Mike Quigley and Tom Graves in our blunt exchanges, and that's helpful to be able to go through the issues and try to resolve the issues that we have. We need to submit a final conference report, and we need to be able to finish our work to be able to get this done. Some of you have mentioned how long it has been since your particular subcommittee bill has been conferenced. Well, we can honestly say this one has never, ever been conferenced. This is the first time FSGG has ever gotten to this point, and we would like to get it to the next point to actually pass it across the floor, so that would be helpful. Financial Services General Government Bill supports some of the most important functions of our governments, things like the federal courts, the IRS, all tax laws and Treasury, construction and upkeep of our federal buildings, the regulation of our financial markets, including dealing with financial interdiction on terrorism as well. So our constituents really are counting on us getting this done. I'd like to avoid a CR on this piece of legislation. It needs additional attention, and I'd like to be able to finish this and get it across the floor and get it done. With that, I look forward to finishing this out in the days ahead.
Thank you, Senator Lankford. Pleased to recognize House Financial Services Ranking Member Mr. Quigley for any remarks he may have.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It has been a pleasure to serve with you, and I appreciate the way you've run this committee. I haven't heard defiant, difficult, and disagreeable for a while. It was the name of my law firm. I also appreciate my Senate counterparts and Chairman Graves for their work. They all have the same goal in mind, to make sure we fund this government, and I appreciate that. It has been disappointing that the House hasn't followed the Senate counterparts in pursuing a more bipartisan appropriations process, but here we are. So we do the best with what we have. I do want to address the chairman of the subcommittee's remarks about kids and grandkids. I supported Simpson Bowles when it was in the House in Cooper La Tourette. I think we all appreciate the fact that we have to address our debt and deficit, but we do this on a big, balanced, and bipartisan basis across the whole of government. For us to try to address this issue through a subcommittee will do one thing, and that is just squash any effort, meaningful effort, that the subcommittee has to fund its elements of government. So it's not that we don't need to address it. Trying to do it now is far less meaningful and completely destructive to the issues that we're concerned about. And I, too, am concerned about kids and grandkids. My concern relates to the fact that we have an open and democratic process that is not meddled with by foreign governments. Chairman Ranking Member Lowy, got ahead of myself, referenced D&I Coates and the concern he has with election security. D&I Coates has said time and time again, and we need to appreciate this, the warning lights are flashing red, and we are not ready. The Russians attacked our democratic process. It's not that they're going to be back. They never left. The last time the integrity of the democratic process was challenged or questioned in this country was after Bush-Gore. And what did we do? We spent $3.5 billion to avoid that happening ever again. That's how much it meant to us now. For 2018, we managed $380 million. So in short, the decimal point was in the wrong spot. We have to train, we have to provide equipment, and we have to provide software. Because where are we at right now, folks? The fact of the matter is my state was the first state where the Board of Elections was hacked. Somewhere between 20 and 40 states have been hacked since then. What's disturbing is we don't even know exactly how many, which defines the scope of the problem. We are not prepared. The Russians have not left. We need to provide this equipment to make sure that we are prepared next time it happens, and we are just weeks away from an upcoming election. There are 12 states that don't even have a paper background to be able to audit an election if they're hacked. Those 40 states that don't have the correct equipment, the old equipment over 10 years old, they can't even apply modern anti-hacking software. I recognize fully that this is not authorized, but folks, there's a heck of a lot of money in this bill that's not authorized. This is our last shot to do the right thing. I certainly appreciate your effort toward that end. Thank you, and I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Quigley. Pleasure to recognize the Senate Financial Services Ranking Member, the aforementioned Senator Coons.
Thank you, Chairman Frelinghuysen, Chairman Shelby, Democratic Leaders Ranking Member Lowy, and Vice Chairman Leahy, both for the convening this conference and for the tremendous progress we've made and the way you've worked together to set strong and clear ground rules to come to a budget agreement and get us moving to this point. I'll just join my colleague and friend, our subcommittee chairman in the Senate, Senator Langford, who has been a great partner. He has a fiery temperament matched only by his spectacular hair color. And I will tell you that I'm envious. Senator Langford and I set good ground rules early, got to work, sat down, worked through the issues. Of course we had different priorities. Of course we had different agendas we'd like to pursue. I, too, would like to have seen election grants in this bill. But I'm grateful for the fact that Senator Langford and I have been able to come to a conclusion, put forward a joint proposal, and it is my hope that we will achieve for the first time ever the complete enactment of an FSGG package. It's been a pleasure to work with my House counterparts, Chairman Graves, Ranking Member Quigley. They're passionate. We've debated vigorously. I'll simply briefly add that this is a subcommittee that funds a very wide range of basic and critical government functions, from IRS and sanctions enforcement to FCC and CFTC, and where the modest but real improvements in investment we would make in this bill are the exact sort of thing which our constituents expect us to do. I will agree with Member Quigley that tackling our budget problems in only one subcommittee in a way that will not make a significant or lasting impact, I don't believe to be the way to carry forward on the bipartisan spirit of the budget agreement that brought us here. I want to close by expressing my real appreciation to our staff, who've been terrific, who've negotiated in good faith, who've contributed well, and it is my hope we can do our job and get this subcommittee appropriations bill across the finish line through conference. Thank you.
Senator Coons. It's a pleasure to turn to the House Agricultural Subcommittee Chair, Mr. Adderholt of Alabama, for any remarks he may wish to make.
Thank you, Mr. Frelinghuysen. I'm pleased to join my colleagues today here as members of this conference committee. And as has been said many times, something we've not done in quite some time. I do want to extend a thanks to Chairman Frelinghuysen for his continued dedication, for his leadership through this process, and fulfilling the commitment to regular order. Also, Senator Shelby, his commitment and taking the reins of just a few short months ago and has really stepped up the plate. So thank you, Senator Shelby, for your leadership on the Senate side. As you know, we all have the fundamental responsibility to fund the operations of the federal government in a timely manner, and that's what our objective is. As chairman of the House Ag and Rural Development, Food and Drug Administration Subcommittee, I want to just highlight just a couple of things. The bill targets funding for the support of rural development, agricultural production, food safety, medical product innovation, safety, sound financial markets, nutrition, needy children, families, and seniors at home and abroad. And there's a couple of things in particular I'd like to call attention to as the investments in rural infrastructure, including the broadband expansion to unserved and underserved areas of rural America, as well as improved drinking water and waste systems. Also, critical investments in agricultural research to develop new techniques and technologies that will help ensure a safe and nutritious food supply for generations to come. And last but not least, investments in medical product safety, from opioid abuse to generic drugs to improve drug development efforts. I would ask my colleagues to support this bill as we move forward, and look forward to continue working with my colleagues.
Thank you, Mr. Adderholt. Pleasure to turn to Senate Agricultural Subcommittee Chair, Mr. Hoven, for any remarks he may wish to make.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I'm pleased to join Chairman Adderholt in reporting the 2019 Appropriations Bill for Ag, Rural Development, FDA, and related agencies for conference committee consideration. I want to thank Chairman Adderholt, our ranking member, Senator Merkley, and Ranking Member Bishop for their efforts in getting us here. And I appreciate the partnership we've developed in crafting the bill. I think we are putting forth a good product in this conference agreement. It's written to our allocation of just over $23 billion. And we've worked hard to invest taxpayer dollars responsibly, funding programs that provide direct benefits to our farmers and rural communities at a time when they very much need it, and supporting programs that provide direct health and safety benefits to all Americans. This bill places significant emphasis on research programs at the Ag Research Service and our land-grant university system. Overall, we increased research funding a total of $164 million. And you all know the incredible impact that ag research has had for our farmers and ranchers. We've got $550 million in there for rural broadband grants and loans, and that makes a two-year total of just over $1 billion that's going into rural broadband. Obviously a major, major initiative. And we make real strides in bridging the digital divide with it between the rural and urban communities. Now, we still have a few outstanding issues to work through, but I believe that we can resolve them in a timely manner. One of my remaining priorities is working to establish regulatory jurisdiction of cell-based meats at USDA. And I look forward to continuing those discussions, but clearly USDA needs to be in charge of this issue, and I strongly support language we have included to require it. Very important on behalf of our ranchers who are out there doing a great job for us every day. Again, I want to thank my partners for the bipartisan, bicameral working relationship that we have on ag. And I also want to add my appreciation to you, Mr. Chairman, to Chairman Shelby, as well as the ranking members, for your leadership in restoring regular order. Very, very important and very much appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Hoeven. Pleasure to turn to House Agriculture Ranking Committee Member, Mr. Sanford Bishop.
I thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and let me thank you for your leadership over the years, along with Ranking Member Lowy. You have, along with Senator Shelby and Senator Leahy, have really set a good example for how Congress should work. So I appreciate that very much. I appreciate the collegiality and the collaboration that I've had and the friendship with Chairman Adderholt, my subcommittee chairman of agriculture. And of course, we have worked very well with Senator Hoeven, Senator Merkley on this bill. And before I go further, I want to thank everyone on my staff and all of the committee staff who worked such long hours to get us here to where we are. We began the FY19 appropriations process in February. It's now time for us to finish the job. For a long time, as has been said, since an agriculture appropriations bill passed before October, but it couldn't come at a more urgent time now. Our farmers, our ranchers, our producers, or in other words, those who feed the country, continue to deal with retaliatory tariffs, the continuation of declining commodity prices. It's our duty to pass this legislation that will provide stability for our agriculture community. I'm happy that we're rejecting the administration's request to cut the Agriculture Research Service by 12% and so many other ill-advised cuts to USDA. That being said, I am concerned with USDA's plan to relocate NIFA and the Economic Research Service outside of Washington, D.C. Agricultural research and economic research ensure that our farmers continue to produce the highest quality, the safest, the most abundant and economical food and fiber anywhere in the industrialized world. The committee has asked USDA for data justifying the relocation, and I hope that they will respond promptly. The bill also will provide, as has been said, much-needed resources to our rural communities that still face broadband, housing, water, and wastewater and health care challenges. Furthermore, the bill adequately funds McGovern-Dole and Food for Peace programs that provide essential food that helps keep children in school and feed hungry people abroad. But I'm disappointed that we couldn't come to an agreement on the supplemental nutrition assistance retailer data issue. I feel that allowing SNAP retailer data to be public could adversely impact rural communities and low-income urban communities all across the country where food deserts are all too prevalent. Our colleagues are still negotiating the 2018 Farm Bill, in which drastic cuts and changes to the SNAP program and the House bill have made the headlines. But I want to express my unwavering support for the program and my appreciation that this committee rejected proposals that would limit access or abandon vulnerable people such as children, veterans, and senior citizens. I want to commend the FDA for the strong proactive measures that it took on yesterday in its efforts to prevent minors from accessing and using e-vapor and e-cigarette products. I fully understand that this is still a controversial issue. While I believe that these products do not belong in the hands of minors, I firmly believe that these products provide a viable alternative to regular combustible cigarettes for adults. We must find an appropriate balance as this issue and the technology continue to evolve. We should never prevent adults from having a safer alternative to combustible tobacco products as a vehicle to quit smoking because we are unwilling to take the necessary steps to keep these products out of the hands of children. Children should never have access in the first place. Finally, it's my belief that USDA should have jurisdiction over the emerging industry of cultured meat. Although we may be years away from mass production and sale, it is important for Congress to play a role early on. I look forward to engaging my colleagues on this issue as it moves forward, and I agree with Senator Hoeven that this should be led by USDA. I want to reiterate my support for the committee's commitment and its efforts to pass appropriations bills on time. I again thank the chairman, vice chairman, ranking members on both sides of the aisle, as well as our staffs. The appropriators in this Congress have it right. Funding our government for and by the people of this country is not a Republican or a Democratic responsibility. It's an American responsibility. A responsibility to all of the American people without regard to partisan considerations. And I am just proud to be a part of this group to make sure that we do our jobs and fulfill our charge and our obligation to the American people. I thank you, and I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Bishop. Pleased to recognize the Senate Agricultural Ranking Member, Mr. Merkley, for any remarks he may have.
The fact that we are gathered around this table is a tribute to the leadership of the full committee, the House leadership, the Senate leadership, the Democratic leadership, the Republican leadership. And so, well done. And I particularly enjoyed working with my colleague, Senator Hoeven, on these agricultural issues, these rural development issues that are so important through every state in our union. And I know the House team came to the table and worked well to resolve a host of issues, and I appreciate that. This 2019 bill had strong support on the floor of the Senate, and I anticipate that the conference report will as well. We have to figure out these items that are still open and resolve those. It's important that we not have new poison pills added that will take down this process after we've come so far. Particularly pleased that we have sustained agricultural research. My colleagues have mentioned rural broadband, which is something I just believe we have to have high-speed broadband in every rural town in America. Without it, you simply can't have a modern economy. rural housing, rural water, nutrition, the work of the FDA, the foreign food aid. All those are important components that we have worked to address together. We have a few issues left. Let's get them resolved, and let's get this bill to the Oval Office. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Merkley. Pleased to recognize the House Transportation THUD Subcommittee Chair, Mr. Diaz-Balart.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. You know, some folks outside of this group don't know how tough it is to put these bills together, and you know, you got to get bipartisan support. It requires the president to sign on to it, and I will tell you that it would not be possible without. So I reiterate what my colleagues have already said. Without the leadership, both House and Senate, of the full committee chairman, the ranking members, and as an example of how difficult some of these things may be to put together, I will tell you that, for example, after the House mark, our bill took a $800 million reduction. And yet, because of the hard work of the ranking member, Mr. Price, who, by the way, I think let's all remember that he's not here because his part of the country is now facing that imminent threat of a major storm. Also, Mr. Reid, the ranking member of the Senate, who is an incredibly strong advocate for issues that are important, and to my counterpart, the chairwoman. If there is a smarter, a tougher, and yet a fairer and a more straightforward person in this institution, I've yet to meet that person. Because of this working relationship, I think this is a really good bill. Let me tell you what we do. This is the second historic installment on our nation's infrastructure. We do even more than last year, doubling down on roads, on bridges, on ports. This bill, Mr. Chairman, continues the down payment on infrastructure that we made last year in last year's bill. So this is a number I think everybody needs to listen to. We're totaling $21.4 billion in new infrastructure funding over 2 years. That's real. That is real. $3.3 billion for highways and bridges and bridge grants. $725 million above last year's level. And for a couple of our economic drivers, ports and airports, nearly $4 billion for airport grants. And for the first time, by the way, funding the other one of our nation's top economic drivers, ports, nearly $300 million. The bill also includes a number of priorities for our members that people care so much about. Let me just throw an example, including, for example, an agriculture exemption for the electronic logging devices. At the same time, we have targeted investment to provide housing for our nation's veterans, for the disabled, for our senior citizens. Now, we have done this while scrubbing every account. There has to be zero tolerance, no room for waste, for fraud, and abuse. And we've worked awfully hard, and I'm so proud of the work we've done to make sure that we've scrubbed all the accounts. Mr. Chairman, this bill will lead to frankly, more American jobs, for a more American manufacturing, a better and a modernized American infrastructure system. So again, a lot of hard work. I am grateful for the folks that I've had the privilege to work with, and I'm particularly grateful to the chairman of the committee, and with that I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Diaz-Balart. Pleased to recognize Mr. Diaz-Balart's Senate counterpart, the chairwoman of the committee, Mrs. Collins. Ms. Collins, for any remarks you may have.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, since I haven't seen you to talk to in person since you made your decision to retire, I want to take this opportunity to thank you for your extraordinary service to the Congress, to your constituents, and to our country. You truly will be missed. I want to also thank my House counterpart for his very kind words. Chairman, Diaz-Balart and I have worked extremely closely together, and I could not have a better partner. Miami and Maine are very different places, and yet we managed to work together to make sure that the needs of our nation are met, and I thank him for that. Unlike one of my colleagues who was talking about his ranking member and described him as defiant and difficult, I could not have a better partner in Senator Jack Reed, and I know that it was a joke about Senator Coons. Let me make that clear. But Senator Reed and I have worked together as a real team, and I know that Chairman Diaz-Balart and Representative Price have as well, and my sympathies go out to the constituents of Representative Price. I also want to thank the full committee chairman and ranking members, Senator Shelby and Senator Leahy, for continuing to push us forward. We've worked really hard during the past few weeks to resolve the differences between the House and Senate versions of the T-HUD bill. I refuse to call it the THUD bill, T-HUD bill. And I am convinced that we can get all of these bills across the finish line, and we must. We can't come this far and not achieve the goal. So we've made very good progress, and we need to make sure that this next batch of bills, T-HUD, Interior, Ag, and Financial Services, also are moved in final version before the House and the Senate and on to the President's desk. We don't want a continuing resolution that just causes problems that we're all aware of, and there's no need for it when we've come this far. The fiscal year 2019 T-HUD bill continues the increased funding levels for the infrastructure programs that the House Chairman has mentioned. It continues to fund the popular build grants, previously known as Tiger, which support much-needed infrastructure projects. It has provided jobs and economic growth in every one of our home states. We once again deliver increased funding for highways and include a program for the deteriorating bridges in rural areas, as well as a program to help strengthen our ports. We fund homeless assistance programs to make targeted investment to reduce homelessness among our veterans, our youth, and survivors of domestic violence. We also provide resources for home modifications for low-income seniors, enabling them to stay in their own homes and age in place. We provide robust funding for lead grants, which help make homes safer for families with young children by removing harmful lead-based paint. I know and hope that we can reach a final agreement on this package soon. And when we do, I'd urge my colleagues to support this minibus. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you,
Chairman.
Senator Collins. For recognizing Senator Reed, I want to acknowledge the efforts of David Price to try to reach us long distance. I'm sure we would wish him and those in the path of the storm every good wish and safety for their immediate futures. My pleasure to recognize the senator from Rhode Island for any remarks on the T-HUD bill that he may wish to give.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As the last scheduled speaker, let me begin by asking that my written remarks be made a part of the statement.
Consider it done.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for your great work. I want to first commend Senator Shelby, Senator Leahy for their great leadership. Certainly, Senator Collins for her superb efforts and collegiality and understanding. The staff has done a superb job for us. Chairman Diaz-Balart, Representative Price, thank you for your cooperation and help. 2 points I'll make. First, this bill, I think, does keep our commitment to affordable housing for so many different groups of Americans. The homeless, seniors, disabled Americans, we're doing what we can to help them. But most importantly, I think, in echoing Chairman Diaz-Balart, This is the infrastructure bill. This is what we talked about in the 2016 campaign. This is what we committed to do for the American people. This is the infrastructure bill. And so I would just urge, rather than focus on legislative riders, let's focus on bridges, roads, and transit for America's riders. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator, I want to thank all of you for your remarks and your work on the bill, and especially we'd all like to acknowledge the spectacular work the committee staff has done over the last couple of months. I believe that Ms. Lowy has some additional comments, and if it's all right, I'd be happy to recognize you, Chairman Shelby.
Although the technology is there, somehow the technology has not worked, and I was just asked to read a few words, maybe more than a few words, from David Price, who is very grateful to his participation with Chairman Diaz-Balart, and wanted me to make it very clear that he thanks Chairman Diaz-Balart for your willingness to collaborate on the FY 2019 THUD bill, and to Senator Collins and Reed for their leadership and cooperation. As you've heard from others here, we've reached agreement on funding for every account in the THUD bill, and thanks to the 2-year budget agreement, we've locked in many of the funding increases from last year. This includes steady funding for core housing programs, new units for elderly and disabled housing, and additional funding above the FAST Act authorized level for highways, bridges, transit, rail, and aviation programs. We also ensure that the BUILD grants, formerly TIGER, and capital investment grants are fully funded, while also including language to hold the administration accountable as they administer these programs. Although we were able to address many policy items on a bipartisan basis, there are several partisan riders that remain unresolved in THUD and dozens of bad riders within the other bills in this package. The solution is simple. He is saying, as Ranking Member Lowy has stated, as you can see, I don't even have to ad-lib here. But it's really, he mentions that I've said over and over again, and I want to thank my friend Senator Shelby, we really need to follow the Senate model. I hope, this is again from Mr. Price, I hope my Republican colleagues will end their insistence on including poison pill provisions on these appropriation bills. There is no other way to achieve bipartisan support and complete our work in a timely fashion before the start of the fiscal year. And Mr. Price sends his best that we all continue to work hard as he is dealing with something that is beyond our ability to resolve right now, but I won't discuss any other environmental legislation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Lowy. Please recognize our great chairman, Chairman Shelby.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, I want to join the chorus in thanking you for your service and wishing you well. I've worked with you on a lot of conferences when we used to have conferences, and you've always been forthright. You bring strong leadership, and we wish you well. Now, what do we have here? What do we learn here today? We've got 4 bills. We've got 4 trains running near the station. We've got to keep them there, and we've got to get them to the station, and the sooner the better. If we can work, and we have, worked the defense HHS, which we did today, and concluded this. We can do this. This is a big milestone for all of us on appropriations, and we've got to do it. We're this close on these bills. Let's wrap it up, if there's any way to do it. Thank you.
I share your commitment. Any further comments by any of the members? If not, the meeting stands in recess subject to the call of the chair.
Thank you.
Thank you all for participating, and thanks to the staff.